So,
Hello and welcome to Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. I am your co-host JP John Paz from the two-man power trip of wrestling. And of course, I'm joined by the star of the show, the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion. He is, of course, the man behind the NWO, one of the greatest bookers and minds ever in the history of professional wrestling. He is Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, John. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing very good. Very, very good. It's great to talk to the Taskmaster, the Games Master, even though you're out there in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yes, I am. I mean, it's funny, I'm a historian, and the Bermuda Triangle is, between Florida and Bermuda, and that square there. But we do have a semi Bermuda Triangle up here because a lot of ships have gone down here. But the reason why I believe, and if you want to believe, you know, that it was aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever, the reason why they went down here is you got to remember when this was, especially, we'll say in Florida, I have an Atosha coin. An Atosha coin was founded by Mel Fisher. Mel Fisher found the largest group of silver and now gold coins. He just found the gold coins lately. And most of the people that were locals had an Tosha coin. You know, I guess it made you, people knew that you were local. But up here, they had, people don't realize there was and I found it fascinating. Uh, did you ever see? I believe it was on Netflix. It's a series that's coming back again. Taboo.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Do you know what that's about? Taboo was by Tom, not Hanks,
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy, right? And what it was, uh, do you know the War of 1812 was fought over a pig and also the line of uh, our the line moved. If you go back to when the line was before 1812, right? If you looked at the line was a straight line on off of Canada across. We were straight completely, right? And then what happened was because uh, we actually, I guess, won the war. It was disputed whether we won or not. Was the line went up where the islands where I live on became part of the United States, and then they went down and they became straight again. Uh, Victoria Island, which Vancouver Islands rather, which is the capital of Victoria Island, became Canada. We wanted that, and we became that became a sticking point for us for 3 years. People died. It doesn't matter if one person died, or 300, or 500, or 1,000 people. They died because of that. And the unique part was that when they had when that happened, it was all because a pig going back. It reminds me of the Hatfields and McCoys. The
Hmm.
Hatfields battle was over a pig. and that's what it was. It was a pig, and the pig was supposedly taken from a uh, American settlement, and the English was saying it was from an English settlement. So it was pretty amazing. But as I can't wait till this Tom Hardy next adventure comes out because it's very, very interesting. Because he has enough real history into it where you're gonna get it. You know what I mean? You're gonna get to see it, which I
Yeah.
think is fabulous.
Yes, nice little history lesson here on
Yeah.
Taskmaster Talks from you. That's nice. But what I really wanted to get into today was a topic that was the one I think that was probably requested the most. We've had some other topics on the show that was definitely highly regarded and people wanted to talk about it and get your response from. But this one I feel like has been requested the most over the time, and this is all about the crippler. Chris Benoit, arguably your greatest rival. You are arguably his greatest rival. And it was one of those feuds where, whoo, man, you guys lit each other up. So when did you first see of him, hear of him, know of him?
I was not in uh, WCW at the time. I was working in Japan, and I had seen him as Bobby Spartan. And I said, this kid's got it. He's got it. He could break the mold of the height barrier.
Hmm.
They might have told you there was no height barrier in professional wrestling at the time to be a world champion, but there was. And he was so intense. He was, you know what I'd say about Willie's suspension of disbelief?
Hmm.
He made you believe everything he did. He was one. I won. I shouldn't say. We won match of the year when I wrestled in Baltimore, and I think we were runner up in the San Francisco match of the year, and runner up in another match of the year. And it wasn't because of me. It was because of Chris. He was so intense, and he would light you up, but he didn't mind getting lit back up. And the other thing about Chris, he looked like he was taking your head off. He looked like he was taking your head off, but he wasn't. Yeah, he was what back in the day we called a very smooth boy. He was a Ray Stevens type, a Pat Patterson type. He was from the old school. He was a uh, 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 he was the closest thing to the Dynamite Kid I ever saw. And if you looked at them, they looked. Their appearance was so similar. Their builds were similar. Their moves were similar. Uh, it was an amazing thing to watch those two in the ring. And I've seen some tapes, John, and you can help me out here. Have you ever seen many tapes of them? I don't know if there's many tapes of them. I would love to see their performance because just regular matches they had were some of the best matches on the card, including Tiger Mask. I mean, you know, they say the camera doesn't lie, and it certainly doesn't lie on Benoit. And you can go down the list: Benoit Malenko, Benoit Chavo, Benoit and Chavo Jr., Eddie, Hector, you can go down the list. And I'm sure there's some Japanese guys I'm leaving out. Uh, Fit Finley and Regal, some of the greatest matches I've ever seen. But I'm missing out on guys that wrestled that were in England that maybe we never got a chance. Maybe they didn't tape as much as we did. You think that's possible, John?
Or it's harder for us to get some of the footage. But yeah, if tape traders and tape collectors, they know Rollerball Rocco, it was a great one. Robbie Brookside, great one. Some Japanese guys like Liger and obviously when Benoit wrestled him, I mean they tore it up. Samurai tore it up. Eddie Guerrero when he was over in Japan with Benoit was just amazing. Yeah, there's so many great matches and great talents that we wish we saw a lot of. And if you can get a hold of it, Tiger Mask versus Dynamite Kid, those series of matches are some of the greatest matches ever.
Yes, and I agree 1,000%. And they made it. The thing that was so amazing to me, there was no out and out heel. It could be a guy could be a heel in, we'll say, London, and then he would go to Blackpool and he'd be a babyface because the people would take him that way. And they had some spectacular Les Thornton, the older guys, Les Thornton, the Tony Charles, the Billy Robinsons. I mean, I can go on. I was when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of English wrestling because I thought they made it look so real. And I really enjoyed the English wrestling. And I got the magazine. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. His father was one of the promoters of the joint promotion. Steve Clements. Sir Steve Clements was a manager and a worker. He was a great performer and became a worker in the United States. And Steve gave me these books, and I would look at it. And I mean, they had incredible series of pictures. I guess because they knew that they had seen these guys take so many bumps that they knew the continuation of the moves. They were really spectacular.
Now, as far as Benoit, we're saying all these great workers. He's right up there, if not the top. He's probably in the top 5 greatest workers or greatest technicians of all time. But who is actually responsible for bringing him into WCW? Bischoff mentions it. A lot of people think that they got him from ECW, but Bischoff is always talking about how they had their eye on New Japan Pro Wrestling, and that's where they kind of saw Benoit and wanted him. Obviously, Benoit, if you really think about it, was actually in WCW before he was in ECW because he was there for a while. He was on a lot of Clash of Champions. He was on a couple pay-per-views. If you watch Super Brawl 93, he's got a great match against Too Cold Scorpio on there. So, I mean, he's been around the block, but how does he make his return to WCW and who's kind of scouting him? Is Bischoff scouting him from New Japan or are you bringing him in?
At that period, Eric had brought him in. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he mostly Bobby's partner at this time?
Earlier on, yes, but when they bring him back in, he
No,
was. They did team.
that's where I'm going.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then I saw what they brought to the table, meaning Benoit, Eddie, Chris, Perry Satin. I may be missing somebody, but I don't think I am. And I called Paul. Paul and I were friends, and I didn't want to leave him out to dry. And I tried to do what we used to do when we were territories and had some respect for one another. Maybe I didn't understand that putting people out of business was a good thing, but I understood that if you put people out of business, that you would sometimes cost people and their families jobs. So I would call Paul, and I would say to Paul, I even did it when I left there. I said, Paul, I'd like to get him in 6 weeks. If that's not possible, when do you think I can get him? And he would say he knew it was going to happen. He knew they were going to be able to pay these guys that he couldn't afford. He couldn't afford to pay those guys that kind of money. And Paul, and like I said, Paul and I had a great relationship. And Paul would say, if I can keep them for 8 weeks, I got a big show 8 weeks from now. And I would go to Eric and I'd say, hey, Eric, listen, it isn't going to hurt us. It isn't going to hurt us. They have their own clientele. It's going to hurt their company, but it's also going to hurt their families. I wish. And Eric, you know, you hear things about Eric not being a nice guy. Eric's a good guy. Anytime I went to Eric and said that, he would, he played the tough guy role and say, but you could see he would say, okay, if 6 weeks I won, but 8 weeks, what's the difference? Eric is a very humane person. I hadn't spoken to Eric like in 20 years. When I spoke to him, I said, I'd like to speak to you. Can we step outside? And I said to him, you were very good to me at some of the toughest times of my life, and I want to thank you. And he was unanimously such a good guy to say, oh, you don't have to do that. Well, I did, because at that period of time, for me, I wasn't the best guy in the world. And he was a super, super guy. And we could have squashed Paulie inside of a month. I'm not gonna, let's put it this way, John. If we went and offered almost everybody except maybe Shane Douglas and maybe Taz $200,000, they were all left in a day. Do you believe that?
Yes, I believe it.
Especially since he owed the money, right?
Yep.
Eric was a gentleman. Eric was a gentleman. It might have cost him in the long run, but not really in the long run, because Eric can put his head down at night and say he did the right thing.
So you obviously loved Benoit as far as what you saw. Did Bishop see him and like him, or is he taking your opinion?
The problem, I think, back then was they saw Eric saw them as vanilla midgets, where I saw them as talented performers. And the thing was, you got to remember, let's go to back then. You had Hogan, you had Nash, you had Hall, you had Adam Bomb, you had Crush, you had Scott Norton, you had
A lot of big guys.
yeah,
The land of the giants. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of who else could be. Oh, uh, we had Typhoon and One Man Gang. We had Rick Rude. We had huge guys. Colin Heat, huge guys. Sid, Goldberg. And then we have guys that look like a guy that's an average looking guy. And because of that, we created a great thing called the Cruiserweight Championship. I was trying to be alert that how did I make the Cruiserweight champion as tough as the regular guys when Eddie won the Cruiserweight belt? I think might have been, I might be wrong. Was it 3 or a month later he won the U.S. heavyweight title?
I don't remember the timing of it, but I know he was both cruiserweight champion. He was U.S. champion. Probably wasn't too far off from one another.
Yeah, so I was showing that size didn't matter. And then the famous Nash and Ray Mysterio match. You remember that?
Yep. Big upset.
Yeah, and they had lost up until Kevin had lost up until that time, and it also, a lot of people don't understand Kevin Nash because he can say he's the wittiest guy I know in the wrestling business, and he can say things to irritate you. I think he does it just to irritate you, and you don't know where he's coming from. And I'll get back to that. And then he goes out and puts Rey Mysterio over. Everybody's going, "Oh wow, he put Rey Mysterio over." They must have fucking told him he had to. No, they didn't tell Kevin. Kevin knew that it was the right thing for business. There was a great line that Kevin said one time. Him and I had an argument one time, and he called me up to the hotel room, and I came down, and someone said, "What could have happened?" And he said, "I might have hurt my head hitting the door jamb trying to get at him." So, I mean, Kevin is I've seen Kevin take some bad, bad knocks when he's nothing more than a wrestling fan, just like us. And I think that's why, Kevin, I have a connection. I think that's why the kid, Scott Hall, and I have a connection. It's because we're wrestling fans. We're wrestling fans. Now, was Kevin going to put a guy Ray size over? No. But, you know, and he knew, if you remember, Scott Hall put the 1, 2, 3 kid over, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
he didn't do it right away. He made the kid work at it. He made the kid earn it. And he made, when it happened, it wasn't the first night out. The people popped and said, "Oh my God, we didn't see this." The three of them, that Hall and the kid, could book any place and make the place better. Without question. Without question.
So when Benoit's about to kind of move away from the cruiserweights, and obviously he's climbing the ladder in WCW, doing quite well. The kind of big thing that happens to him, and we're kind of skipping over some major points here, but he's going to have some great matches with Jericho, and he's going to have a great match with Liger, and he's going to go through WCW. But the big point to me is when you make him a four horseman. Is that your decision to put him in the four horsemen with
Yeah.
Arn, Rick, and Brian Pillman, or is that Rick and Arn's decision?
Well, I went to them because it was their group, and I said, I'd like to put Brian in with you guys. And they just jumped at it. They said, "There's no one more suitable than Chris." I said, "I just want to hear you say that." And it was true. It was true.
So did you have to? I guess you didn't really have to convince them at all that he could be a horseman. But was there any sort of like long negotiations or talks, or was it just that quick? Like, nope, I want him in the horseman. He's in.
It was, I got to ask you guys a question. They have around, what is it? I'd like to put Chris Benoit in the horseman. Super, super. We want it. Yeah, great, Kev. Thanks. We love it. Boom.
He does fit the horseman just perfectly, and I love that four horsemen. It's kind of an underrated, and they weren't around long enough because of the Pillman stuff, and kind of ended it quickly. But Benoit, Pillman, Arn, and Flair was, I think, an awesome, underrated, although short run four horsemen.
I also said, could you imagine if they had stayed a little longer? They would, and there's been some great four horsemen. Barry Windham. I have a special spot in my heart for Barry Windham. And to me, Barry Windham will always be a four horseman. But as time got progressed, and I'm not trying to belittle Ric Flair at all, the greatest world champion of all time, but he could have stepped back and been a coach sometimes, and it would have been look at the talent. Barry and Jericho and Chris. Could you think of,
Malenko, yeah, or
yeah,
Pillman. Yep.
yeah. Can you think of any better working?
No, those are like kind of the top work rate guys. If you really think about it, especially Dean and Chris and Arn and Barry. They're all known as some of the greatest workers of all time. Undertaker just said Arn's the greatest technical wrestler ever in his mind. So that's a great group of workers right there.
Oh, and it was nice to hear, to me, the greatest money drawer in the history of wrestling say that about another guy that doesn't get his due. Arn Anderson, to me, is the hardest working man in show business. And on the flip side of the coin, nobody has ever drawn the money that the Undertaker has drawn for 25 years now.
30.
30 years. For 30 years, nobody has ever drawn the money. And here's something, kids who listen to us that want to be pro wrestlers. Up until this year, he never broke character. He never said, "Oh, we had such a great match. See you next week. I love the juice." What are you, stupid?
Hmm.
If you want to learn how to hit, you fucking learn how to hit from getting a Ted Williams encyclopedia. If you want to learn how to throw touchdown passes, you get a Tom Brady book. If you want to learn how to draw money in professional wrestling, you get a Undertaker book. You don't do it any other way.
So back to Benoit, who is the big subject of today. So basically, Brian Pillman and you are feuding, and we've talked about this in a prior episode. Go back into the archives and check that one out. That was a really great episode as well. But Pillman and you are feuding. He called you Booker Man. He leaves. You kind of work the whole exit. It's kind of a work. It's kind of a shoot. It's kind of both. It's just craziness with Benoit with Pillman. So then kind of Benoit becomes your feud after that. What was the transition there? Just because you want to go from horseman to horseman and you thought that would be a kind of a good transition to the next feud?
Yeah, and there was also the transition that there was the problem with the horseman and the dungeon, and then it was started with Brian, right? But I needed that aggravation with heels. Up until that time, there was never too much aggravation with heels. You could go out and be a horseman's partner for a night. We made it cut and dry that you couldn't do that. And the reason why I was doing that was I wanted us to come together to say, we're going to save WCW against the NWO. Nothing else matters. It's an old thing. I learned this from Tony Atlas one time, from Tony and our tag team partners as Americans during the time they boycotted the Olympics. Do you remember when we boycotted the Olympics in 80, I believe, or 81?
Mm-hmm.
You remember? And I
Yep.
did an interview where I had a black Cub Scout on my lap. Tony had a white Cub Scout on his lap. And we sat there with the kids and said, boys, there's no black, there's no east, there's no west, there's no south, there's no north, there's no black, there's no white, there's just Americans, and we're all unified, and we're going to beat the Russians in the Omni for the belt for the people. Jane Kennedy put that on, and I've mentioned this before, on the news, the ABC news that came on at 8 o'clock. And she said it was the first good thing she ever saw in wrestling. And I took that as, well, if she thought that was good, let's make it into a work where it was, we're trying to save our company and say it. And I always want to do this thing subconsciously to save your job. Because the worst thing in the world is people losing their jobs. You have these plans. Well, next year, Donald, I'm going to take you to the Grand Canyon. The kids and I and you are going to tent out there. We're going to see bald-headed eagles. We're going to see the wolves. Oh, wait a minute. I got fired. I want to make it us against them.
So when you have this feud and this transition to this feud, obviously Pillman, like we talked about in the other episode, he's going to exit. He's going to go to ECW for a little bit. He's going to have a horrible car crash. Then he's going to go to the WWF, and he's never going to be seen really again, except for these two random sporadic appearances in WCW in the February, Marchish of '96, but then ECW, and then the car crash in the WWF. But anyway, the Benoit feud really, really starts to heat up. And you mentioned kind of, match of the year candidate for Super Bowl VII, match of the year at Great American Bash '96 in Baltimore. I mean, you guys had an awesome feud and awesome chemistry. But the kind of the crux in the beginning of this feud is really, in essence, Benoit, quote unquote, stealing, Nancy from you and stealing it. When you
Right.
decide to go in that direction, I mean, that's pretty like real. I mean, that's like crazy that you would kind of not want
Well,
to do that, but it's like, wow, this is like, okay, okay, this might be fake, or the NWO might be real, or oh, Jimmy Hart stuff is corny and cheesy or something. But you're like, oh my God, Benoit Sullivan, this is real. Holy crap. This was like mind blowing as a fan.
well, Nancy and I had been separated for 9 months. I was living in the Keys. She was living in Daytona. We had been going our separate ways for a while. It was, I didn't know she, I never thought with Benoit because of his two children and he had a young baby, but I knew we were at the final moments.
Hmm.
So uh, for me, it was I asked him, and she actually came to me with the idea and said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "We're planning our own demise." She said, "Yeah, we both respect each other. We know what's going to happen. So, what do you think?" I said, "If you want to do it, let's do it. I'm all for it. Just make sure that his wife is first."
And man, I mean, when you, especially as a fan back then, I was like, wait, as you find out, I was like, wow, I can't believe like this is a lot of realism into wrestling. And I think if you really kind of look at it, that kind of lent to the feud and making it quote unquote more personal, more real. I think that's why the fans bought it because they're like, wow, this is legit. Like these guys hate each other. So did you guys hate each other
Do we hate each other?
at that
No,
point? Yeah, when you first started feuding.
I really like Chris. I really like Chris. I wanted to make him the world champion. How could you hate somebody you want to make the world champion? The problem was maybe across the country they thought that, but in the Keys, they knew that this was not legit. They hadn't seen her in 9 months, and every time I would go out, I was with somebody else. So for them, it wasn't, you know, hard for them to figure out what was going on. If it was today's day and age with TMZ and the internet, it would have been completely different.
When was the first time you remember actually having a match with him? Because the first thing I could find is worldwide from February of '96. It's going to be the Horsemen against the Dungeon of Doom in a 6-man tag. Is that kind of the first time you remember wrestling him, or is there possibly a time before that?
I think there was a time before that I wrestled in an house show, and I
W-
saw how it was, and I said, "Well, this kid is so much talent that I reached in and reached back to work with him."
When you were working with him, did you think this guy is like stiff and snug? Because like you were saying before, it
Oh,
kind of looks like he's taking your head off. It looks like he's killing it. Did you think he was stiff or snug at all?
oh, my work was the same as his. I was snug. I had people say that I was. I had people tell me years later that when they saw my name against theirs, they were petrified. I would never hurt anybody, but I made sure the people could hear it. I was from the school that if you didn't hear it, I'll give you an example. The worst thing I ever did in my life, and I regret this day, and when I say prayers to atone for my sins, Eddie Graham came to me and said, "This guy just walked up to me and he works at a butcher shop part time and said, 'Don't worry, I'm going to give Kevin Sullivan a good match. And here's a chair.' And I said, well, what's the chair for? He said, that chair better not be one piece when you come back or you don't have a job. So, unfortunately, the chair wasn't in one piece. Stan Lane was in a bar where a guy pushed Holly Race. And before Holly Race could sucker punch the guy, Stan Lane hit him with a round ashtray, those old crystal ashtrays, and split him all the way down the middle. In the Florida territory, there was no losing fights. If you lost a fight in the Florida territory, you lost your job.
So it means, yeah, you got to be tough, obviously, to be a wrestler. And the thing is with Benoit and you, which is something obvious. I mean, we've mentioned this kind of before, but the thing is that kind of is funny to me is that some of the guys like Hogan or Nash or someone would be like, oh, Kidman or I don't know, Eddie or somebody. Maybe these guys are too small. Or Nash is saying, oh, Benoit and Eddie or Vanilla Miz are too small. You are technically probably the same height. Maybe you're a little bit taller than Benoit. So did you ever take any of that personally? Like, hey, I'm not that big either.
Well, I always thought I was 6 feet 8, because I was lucky enough to work with the big guys. Well, I remember the first. I think also told the story. The first night they decided that I had done this thing, half baby face, half heel, in Florida. I was working with Blackjack Mulligan, and back in those days we didn't go across. Mulligan came across to the heel side. No, he had me come across the babyface side and said to Dusty, he said, "We're to go with him or not?" And Dusty said, "Okay, can you guys do a DQ?" He said, "Absolutely not. He's got to beat me. He's got to beat Kendall, come down and save me. He's got to beat Barry, if he comes down and save me." And he said, "You're going to hit the ring and people think you're going to save me. He's going to leave you laying and walk out of the ring with the four of us." So I was lucky enough to have guys, and I learned to be an illusion. I realized that when I wrestled Blackjack Mulligan or Superstar Billy Graham or even Andre the Giant, I had to get them on their back and I had to be standing up. So when the comeback came, they were out on the floor, maybe one or two punches, and they would go into the ring and then would step on the top rope, and I'd be on my knees, and the top was the size difference. But I was lucky enough to have fabulous, from Ernie Ladd to Superstar Billy Graham, for guys that really, really took care of me. Barry Windham, another one, took care of me.
So with Benoit and you, obviously there's going to be a bunch of matches. Like you said, you guys would wrestle house shows. I mentioned worldwide, and there would be a couple tag matches, a couple 6-man tags. Eventually, you guys would start having maybe some one-on-one matches on house shows and things like that. A brief tag team it excuse me, Slamboree 96. You guys had that when it was part of that lethal lottery. You guys are a team, and obviously there's some dissension there because Public Enemy somehow gets the draw where they're a team and you guys aren't. But that was like the first thing where it's like, okay, you guys lose together, you kind of blame each other, and that's building the feud and building the feud. Is that just easily how it was laid out? Let's just lethal lottery, the luck of the draw. We're just going to end up being partners. We're going to end up turning on each other, and we're going to continue this feud.
Yes, yes, yes. And one of the greatest matches I ever had, and she was one of the greatest woman wrestlers of all time. Jackie was my manager.
Oh yeah, yep, yeah. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, for sure. She,
Yeah.
yeah, she was a great addition. But I'll just bring her up in 1 second. I just want to first bring up Great American Bash '96, as we were talking about it before. That kind of the basically the pull apart at Slamboree is kind of the leading into uh, the Great American Bash '96 pay per view, which is going to be Falls Count Anywhere. You saying match of the year? It's easily probably pay-per-view of the year too. Just an awesome show. What do you kind of take away from that Falls Count Anywhere match? Because you guys are in the bathroom killing each other. I mean, everywhere. Dusty's commentary is hilarious, but great because he's really like, "Oh my god, these two are killing each other." Shivani thinks you guys hate each other. Just talk about that match because it's unbelievable.
I had to talk him through it because he wanted to do some comical spots, like he wanted to dump ketchup on my head up when we were on the third tier of the uh, cow palace. That would have taken away, I thought. He also wanted to flush my head in the toilet. I thought that would have taken away from it. Sometimes the anticipation is much better than reality. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Anticipation. And that has nothing to do with it. It was just, I think, having been trained a little bit more in psychology because he went from Stu Hart, which they did a lot of ha-ha, to Japan that didn't have the psychology that Eddie Graham and Jim Barnett put out. And that's no disrespect to them. Chris's work was so solid. And getting back to Jackie, the matches look so real because Benoit is going to suplex me off the table, off the top rope onto the table, that she dove and separated the bump from the table where I landed on her. I mean, we did things like it was like death-defying acts. She was to me, and to this day, she is to me the greatest woman wrestler and the greatest woman ballet I've ever seen.
Yeah, and you mentioned on a past episode that you were thinking about losing to her in a match if that were to ever happen.
Yeah, I used to always say she's the toughest woman in the world. She could beat any human up, any man up except me. And I was going to do a thing where I was going to put her over. And I'm definitely against intergender matches. Intergender. You know the greatest intergender match I've ever seen? Ole Anderson booked Masa Saito against Joyce Grable, right? The bell rang. Joyce Grable came out to leg dive Masa. Masa punched her in the face, covered her 1, 2, 3, 4. The match lasted 5 seconds.
Wow.
That's what makes sense.
Well, yeah,
Masa was 270 pounds. She was 130 pounds. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, in a real woman versus man match, it's probably going to end up like that. Yep.
Not if they're a few pounds apart, but a guy that won the gold, or not gold, but the bronze medal in the Olympic Games, a karate expert. Come on.
Yep. So at Great American Bash, he gets the win in the Falls Count Anywhere match. The next month, Bash at the Beach, you and the Giant defeat Arn and Chris in a tag team match. So, the feud's pretty much underway. Then on Nitro in September, the Four Horsemen and the Dungeon of Doom are going to wrestle again. The Horsemen get the win. You guys are going to have some house show matches, and then kind of all leading up to World War III 96 from the Scope in Norfolk, Virginia. You defeat Chris Benoit in another great match. I feel like you guys never really had a bad match, right? I mean, it seems like your chemistry was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, we had it was because of him. I take no credit for that. It was him. He never took a night off. He was the true consummate of a professional. if you look in professional wrestler in the dictionary, his name is there.
Then you go to, totally agree, by the way. But then you go to Clash of the Champions 34. He beats you in a Falls Count Anywhere match, and then another match as we're going to, February of 1997, Super Bowl 7 at the Cow Palace, which you mentioned before, in the San Francisco Death Match. He gets another victory in a match that can be considered one of the matches of the year. What is kind of the thought process, the psychology? He's winning a lot here. Obviously, he's kind of more the baby face, I guess. But what's the psychology here? He's getting. You really trying to put him over, get him over.
I'm getting the dressing room to look at him because I'm running through finishes and lacing up my boots and then running out the door. They're watching this guy blow the building up, and rightfully so. And they're saying, holy shit, this guy can work. I can draw money with him. I wanted to show the guys that he was a money drawer. And I think rightfully I did it the right way, because when I asked Sid Vicious, who was 6'9", to lose the guy 5'6", he said, well, I don't agree with it, but you've got this thing rolling, so I'll do what you ask.
And then, of course, you guys will have a few house show matches after that. Even in New Japan Pro Wrestling, you guys had a match at the Tokyo Dome at Battle Formation 97 in April of that year. He gets a victory in about 10 minutes. So you guys are wrestling all over the globe. I mean, you go from Baltimore to San Francisco to Tokyo, Japan.
Right. And that was Chris got us booked there. I think they asked for us, and he had been such a name there. They wanted him to come over there because I had let them know without spilling the beans. I have dear friends and that were King Curtis was a very dear friend of mine, and I wouldn't be spilling the beans if I was having a couple of beers and say, oh, by the way, I think I'm making Chris Benoit the world heavyweight champion. Really? Oh. And, Massa sitting there and a Tory, so it wasn't, one of those stories that you hear people coming just with storylines.
Yes. Now, as far as behind the scenes, what's your relationship like? I mean, this feud is basically going on for a year at this point, which is crazy. And awesome storytelling and great, storyline arc. It's just really, really great. I really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite feuds. I absolutely loved kind of the back and forth, the stiffness. All the matches are great. The realism, the professionalism. So, what's going on behind the scenes? Because it seems like there's got to be some heat there.
There was heat that I was going to knock them down a peg after I spent all this time putting them over. Why? I have no idea.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, a year feud, and he's really going over on most of the matches. I mean, you hardly beat him. And he's definitely looking strong. You even to the point, you bring in Jacqueline to help you, and he's still kind of winning a lot most of the feud.
And he isn't the only one. It's Malenko and Satin, and the Radicals are winning 90% of the matches. Sometimes people get into people's heads and something happens, but I certainly didn't bring it on to hurt them in any way. I wouldn't made a guy a world heavyweight champion.
Right. When you look back at this and you think about the locker room at this point, are they thinking that this is real? And how much of the actual matches were you guys, because it looks real, to me, the layman, to the fans, like, man, they're really killing each other. They really must hate each other. How much is real in the matches?
They know it's not real in the matches, but real about I'm going to screw them in the end. Boy, I was wasting a lot of time if I was going to do that.
Did you take
Yeah.
any cheap shots or liberties with him in the matches? And did he do that with you at all?
Never, and he's mentioned that 1,000 times. Never did. Never did I take a liberty on him.
What about the other way around? Did he ever
No,
do it to you?
never, never,
It's pretty
never.
professional of both of you. If you guys got heat, you have issues. Obviously, the Nancy thing is kind of hanging out there, and he leaves his wife, and obviously you guys break up, and she ends up with Chris. So I mean, that's kind of like a lot of real heat there, and it's just a fascinating thing. You guys are so professional and not killing each other out there. Literally, I mean, because it's like, wow. I mean, the professionalism is crazy.
Well, the heat of my end was ours was over for 9 months. Ours was finished. We were no longer living in the same domicile. I was living 350 miles from her. Where the heat might have came from, he was living with his wife. So I don't know.
Mm. Did the boys in the back ever say anything to you about this feud? Like, wow, this is a little too personal. This is too real. Did they, anything ever mention to you about the feud?
No, because I think most of them knew that I was living in the Keys and I was living at home.
Did you mind working with Nancy at all? I mean, did you have any problems working with her?
No, no. The thing was, we were friends first, and we were friends at the end.
So if you go all the way, I mean, this feud is over a year. So this is crazy. And it's awesome storytelling, like I said, all the way through. Bash at the Beach, 1997, a retirement match. Chris Benoit beats you in about 13, 14 minutes. Another awesome match. And of course, like we mentioned before, with NAWA coming up, another great venue here, the Oceanfront Center in Daytona Beach, Florida. He ends your career and beats you. I mean, that's like the ultimate of putting a guy over, right? He every quote unquote retires you.
Yeah, and the thing was, I was getting ready to settle down to become the booker full time, giving me more time to spend rather than putting on boots and trying to go out and do my own match. It was the best thing I could have done at the time.
And you mentioned Jacqueline taking that crazy bump during that match, and that match is just crazy. Is that one of those things you're retiring, you're going out, you're like, I'm just gonna match is just gonna be crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, me having her as asset made it that much more fun to go out that way. And like I said, I could have done it with a more wonderful lady than her.
Yes. So really, you think about it, July 13th, 1997, at Bash to the Beach is the retirement. You put Benoit over. After that, is there still some bad blood there? I mean, you kind of did the ultimate thing and the ultimate sign of respect, and you putting the guy over in a retirement match. Still bad blood or anything, any heat there at this point?
Not at all. Not at all. Not on my part. I just made him the world heavyweight champion with Sid Vicious. Go in there, like I said, and tell Sid Vicious, who's 6'9", he's putting a 5'7" guy over.
Yeah. So, which is in the prior episode where we talk all about the radicals, and which was a couple weeks ago on the show. Won't go into that too much today because I wanted you to go back to the archives and listen to that episode. Back in 2000, when you really kind of put Benoit, like you said, over big time. He beat Sid for the world title. Then he leaves and he goes to the WWF. But here in '97, it's kind of like a slow burn push that he's going to slowly climb the card and climb the card 90, through 97, then 98, then 99, and obviously in the beginning of 2000, he ends up winning the title. I think maybe there was, I guess, some heat there where he thought he should be over sooner, should have been champion sooner. Was that ever talked about?
Wow, if he thought he needed to be champion sooner, I booked a year out, then I would have had him ripped up a whole year of what I did in production. If he wanted to join me and write it, he could have.
With Benoit and you after the retirement, does he say anything to you, like backstage or anything? Like, does he
Yeah,
respect you?
yeah,
Thank you. What
yeah.
did he say?
He came in and said, "Thank you very much for all of everything you've done for me. I certainly appreciate it. It could have been done in a nicer gesture, and it was done very well."
Now, after he leaves in 2000, that's the last communication you'll ever have with him.
Yes.
Wow. So all those years, I mean, I guess there's like some kind of, obviously, I mean, with Nancy and stuff, it's a little bit of awkwardness, and there's, I guess, some residual heat and stuff like that. Or was that all his end and not your end?
There was no residual heat at all. I mean, my life had gone on 9 months prior. I mean, I was no longer in any domicile I'd ever lived with her. I was 9 months living in the Keys, and a long time. I think by this time we were both out of each other's minds.
Hmm.
I had moved. I had definitely moved on, and she definitely moved on.
As far as that feud and your feud with Benoit, where do you rank it in your top feuds like that you had? Obviously, Dusty's a big one, and I mean you've had some other ones for sure, Blackstick Mulligan. But where do you rank the Benoit feud?
It was probably 2 or 3. Dusty being number one. Was he was great. He was great performer, and uh, fabulous performer. Couldn't take anything else away from him as a worker.
Yep. And obviously, we won't go into the tragedy, but as far as a worker, do you think he was, like I said, maybe the tops or top 5 of all time?
Uh, if he was in the top 5 of all time, he's damn close.
What do you think his legacy is? I mean, obviously, WB has, just taken him out of the history books, so to speak, because of what happened and that horrible tragedy. But what do you think about the legacy, just as far as wrestling is concerned? Not outside wrestling, but his legacy in the business.
What do you think OJ's legacy is?
Well, obviously, same kind of the same vein. But as far as like legacy for wrestling, you think you just can't take one for the other? You have to mix them. You think?
No, I don't think so. I think people can. I think people can look at what. It's a hard question because now you're dealing with mothers, fathers, sisters, uncles, grandmothers. How do you deal with that? But his talent, he was as good as anybody I ever saw.
And obviously, Dark Side of the Ring has their own spin on it. If you've seen that documentary, know something, folks. Not all documentaries are true. Just to throw that out there. Not everything you see in a documentary is true. Even though if those guys do a great job on some other series, not everything is 100% true and factual. Just to throw that out there, just just so people know that. I wanted to make sure that I actually stamped that and absolutely want them to know that.
Why? What did they say?
Well, Dark Side of the Ring kind of spun it in a negative light towards you, and some of that stuff I know for a fact isn't true. As far as just speaking to some other people that you know and some friends of yours, and speaking to you in the past about it, some of the stuff that they put out there was definitely false. We'll just say.
And they talked to other people?
They talked to Nancy's sister. She was on there. They talked to all the other wrestlers. They talked to Jericho and Chavo, but they didn't really give all the particulars about you. It seemed like the documentary was kind of painting you in a bad light, almost putting the gimmick you have, making it seem like the gimmick was more real and that you were, a heel, quote unquote heel or a devil.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah, and then they said some stuff that isn't true if you really look into it. But I don't want to go too far into it because of some other bad, and just to be respectful. But I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that documentary that they did isn't all right.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, and he was a very, very good performer, and I'm sure her mother and father miss her every day. Her mother and father were wonderful people. They were a part of my life for a long time. And I hate to think that they go through this every day. So with that, let's end it on a high note. Hopefully they're on the mend if it can be possible.
Absolutely, and just want to mention your pro wrestling tea storage. We'll get into the plugs. ProWrestlingTees.com. Go to Kevin Sullivan's page. You got a couple options on there that are great. Also, got even more options if you go to Double Hell Wrestling T-shirts. They have a whole array of shirts for you. So just go to Double Hell and type in Kevin Sullivan. You'll see some awesome stuff on there. As far as myself on Instagram, you can follow me at Two Man Power Trip. You can follow Kevin at Taskmaster Talks. You can also follow me on Twitter at Two Man Power Trip. And of course, go to the website, tmptempire.com. Kevin, anything else coming up? Because I know you got some big stuff coming up, NAWA, like we mentioned, on the 19th at the Daytona Beach Center there in the Ocean Center, Daytona Beach, Florida.
The 12th in Greenville, Texas, at SWF Fury. So I'm looking forward to that. And come on down to SW Fury and come and see us.
Also, don't forget about the Blood Hunter. He'll be there with you. And then, of course, like I mentioned, December 19th, the Ocean Center, Daytona Beach, Florida, 1219 NAWA. Check out Ticketmaster for more. And also go to Hannibal TV for more. Devin and aka Hannibal does an awesome job over there. So that's just some great, great stuff. Kevin, any closing remarks as far as anything else you got?
No, let's have a good day and get over this virus, and hopefully we're going to go through it and get through it together on the other side.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week and every week right here on Taskmaster Talks with Kevin.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.